Imagine standing on a dusty hill overlooking a small river in central Italy nearly 3,000 years ago. No grand temples, no mighty emperors, no colossal arenas, just a handful of huts made from wood and mud. It's hard to believe, but from these humble beginnings would rise one of the most powerful civilizations the world has ever seen. A civilization that conquered vast territories, built roads stretching thousands of miles, created engineering marvels that still stand today, and left a legacy that continues to influence our laws, languages, architecture, and culture. This is the story of ancient Rome. So grab yourself a brew, get comfy, and let's travel back through more than 1,000 years of Roman history. Our story begins long before Rome became an empire. In fact, it starts with a legend. According to Roman mythology, the city was founded in 753 BC by two twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. The tale goes that the twins were abandoned as infants and left to die beside the Tiber River. Instead, they were discovered and nurtured by a she-wolf. Bit mental, isn't it? Yet for centuries, Romans proudly embraced this story as the foundation of their civilization.
The Etruscans were an advanced civilization living north of Rome. They introduced sophisticated building techniques, religious customs, and political ideas. Under Etruscan rule, Rome transformed. Roads were built, temples appeared, markets expanded. The once rural settlement began looking more like a proper city. Still, many Romans grew unhappy with monarchy. By around 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their last king and established something entirely new, the Roman Republic. Now, this was a massive turning point. Instead of being ruled by a single king, Rome would be governed by elected officials and a powerful Senate. Mind you, it wasn't exactly democracy as we'd understand it today. The wealthy elite still held most of the power. But compared with many kingdoms of the ancient world, it was a revolutionary system. The Republic would survive for nearly 5 centuries. During this period, Rome expanded relentlessly. At first, the Romans focused on conquering neighboring tribes throughout Italy. One by one, rival cities and kingdoms fell under Roman control. The Roman army became the backbone of this expansion. Roman soldiers were highly disciplined. They trained relentlessly.
Soon, the two civilizations found themselves competing for influence, and before long, competition turned into war. The conflict that followed became known as the Punic Wars. These wars would shape the future of the Mediterranean. The First Punic War focused primarily on naval battles. Rome had little experience at sea. Yet remarkably, the Romans adapted. They built fleets, trained sailors, and eventually defeated Carthage. But the struggle was far from over. The Second Punic War brought one of history's most extraordinary military commanders, Hannibal. Now, this bloke was an absolute menace from Rome's perspective. In 218 BC, Hannibal launched an invasion of Italy unlike anything the Romans had ever seen. Instead of attacking by sea, he marched over the Alps with elephants. Yes, actual elephants. Imagine being a Roman scout and spotting war elephants emerging from snowy mountains. You'd think you'd completely lost the plot. Hannibal won several stunning victories. At the Battle of Cannae, he inflicted one of the worst defeats in Roman history. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. Rome appeared on the brink of collapse. Yet somehow it endured. The Romans refused to surrender. They rebuilt their armies, they adapted their strategies, and eventually they struck back. The war ended with Rome victorious and Carthage weakened.
And ambitious leaders began competing for influence. The Republic was entering a dangerous period. A period that would eventually lead to one of history's most famous figures, Julius Caesar. And blimey, what a character he was. Brilliant general, skilled politician, master propagandist, and arguably one of the most influential individuals who ever lived. Caesar achieved remarkable military success during his conquest of Gaul, modern-day France, and surrounding regions. His victories expanded Roman territory enormously. More importantly, they made him incredibly popular. And popularity often frightened Rome's political elite. Many senators worried Caesar was becoming too powerful. Their fears intensified when Caesar crossed the Rubicon River in 49 BC. This wasn't merely crossing a river. It was an act of rebellion. It meant civil war.
Then came one of history's most famous assassinations, the Ides of March, 44 BC. Inside the Senate chamber, Caesar was attacked by a group of conspirators, stabbed multiple times, killed by men who claimed they were saving the Republic. Instead, they unleashed chaos. The assassination did not restore stability. It triggered another round of civil wars. And from that chaos emerged a young man named Octavian, the future Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, and the beginning of an entirely new chapter in Roman history. The young Octavian was only 18 years old when Julius Caesar was assassinated. At first glance, he didn't look like someone destined to rule the Roman world. He wasn't a famous general. He wasn't physically imposing. And many of Rome's most powerful figures underestimated him. That turned out to be a massive mistake. Octavian was clever, patient, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely determined to secure power. In the years following Caesar's death, Rome descended into chaos. Political alliances shifted constantly. Old rivals became temporary friends. Friends became enemies. Octavian and Mark Antony. Now, Antony was no ordinary politician. He was a celebrated military commander and one of Caesar's closest allies. But his relationship with Egypt's famous queen, Cleopatra, created growing tensions with Rome. Octavian cleverly portrayed Antony as a man who had become more loyal to Egypt than to Rome. Whether that was entirely fair is another matter. But politically, it worked brilliantly. The final showdown came in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. Massive fleets clashed in one of the most decisive naval battles in ancient history. When the dust settled, Octavian emerged victorious. Antony and Cleopatra were defeated. Within a year, both were dead. For the first time in generations, Rome had one uncontested ruler. Yet Octavian understood something important. Romans hated kings. The memory of monarchy still carried enormous stigma. So rather than declare himself king, he carefully crafted a different image. In 27 BC, the Senate granted him a new title, Augustus, meaning the revered one. Officially, the Republic still existed. Unofficially, Rome had become an empire, and Augustus was its first emperor. To be fair, Augustus did a cracking job. After decades of civil war, he brought stability. He reformed the government, strengthened the military, expanded infrastructure, improved taxation, and established a system that allowed the empire to function. And this period would last for roughly 2 centuries. For many Romans, life had never been better. Trade flourished across the Mediterranean. Merchants traveled safely between distant provinces. Roads connected vast territories. Goods flowed from Britain to Egypt, from Spain
to Syria. The empire became a giant network of cultures, languages, and economies. Rome itself transformed into a magnificent metropolis. Marble temples dominated the skyline. Grand public buildings appeared everywhere. Aqueducts carried fresh water into the city. Bathhouses offered relaxation and social gatherings. Markets buzzed with activity. At its height, Rome may have been home to over 1 million people, an astonishing number for the ancient world. Imagine walking through its crowded streets. You'd hear dozens of languages, smell spices from distant lands, see merchants selling exotic goods, encounter soldiers from every corner of the empire.
Politicians gained popularity by sponsoring extravagant spectacles. Some gladiators became genuine celebrities. A bit bizarre by modern standards. But in Roman society, these events played an important role. They reinforced power, displayed wealth, and united citizens through shared experiences. Meanwhile, the empire continued expanding. At its greatest extent under Emperor Trajan around AD 117, Rome controlled territory stretching across 3 continents, from Britain in the north to North Africa in the south, from Portugal in the west to modern Iraq in the east. No empire in Western history had ever grown so vast. Managing such enormous territory wasn't easy. Yet for generations, Rome succeeded remarkably well. Provincial cities flourished, trade expanded, local cultures blended with Roman traditions. Roman law spread throughout the empire. Many conquered peoples eventually became loyal citizens. But despite all this success, challenges were beginning to emerge, and some of those challenges came from within. Political instability became increasingly common.
And when emperors failed, the entire empire felt the consequences. As the centuries passed, military pressures increased. Germanic tribes pushed against Rome's northern frontiers. New enemies emerged in the east. Defending thousands of miles of borders became increasingly expensive. Taxes rose, economic problems developed, inflation weakened stability, and political chaos became more frequent. At one point during the 3rd century, emperors were being replaced at a ridiculous rate. Some ruled for only months before being overthrown or assassinated. Blimey, it was a proper mess. The empire that once seemed unstoppable was beginning to show cracks. Yet Rome still had one more major transformation ahead.
Hello? That's it. صحیح ده زه به ته ویم صحیح ده کپړو په څیر راشه صحیح ده ته خپه نشې ګوره ما سړی ګوره نه سړی مونږ په څه خپه کیږي او کنه هغه سړی دغه وکړو دغه داسې د افغانستان او دغه نه و نه مړه مونږ سوې سړی او کنه مې دا به سره شوی چې تاسو ماته د ګاډي پرېغودو مړه دا خبرې نشته صحیح ده دا خبرې نشته صحیح ده